Well, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me, Myeisha. I'm a big fan of Pacific Clinics, and I'm happy to be here.
Can you tell me, has anxiety always been a part of your life?
I never really considered myself someone who suffered from anxiety, and I knew that a part of me loved adrenaline and loved to try risky things, cliff diving in Vermont in the summers when we were doing new plays where we barely knew the lines in front of a live audience. And I would get very, I guess, anxious. But it wasn't until later in my 40s when I started to experience really intense physical symptoms that I didn't identify with nerves or anxiety at all. I didn't quite understand what was going on with me.
Tell me a little bit about the symptoms that you had.
I would notice a kind of buzzing of energy, very physical in my body. And a lot of times I thought I was getting sick or something. And then a couple of days in, I'd realize something doesn't feel right. And I don't feel like myself. The world feels almost like through a piece of glass.
Was it hard to find help?
It was hard. I mean, I found it through a book, and I had really wonderful therapists and psychiatrists helping me, and I got some relief from medication, but then I was on medication. And I read this book, and it had exercises about how to kind of learn to tolerate the anxiety, how to talk your way through it and not try to resist it. And within 2 days, I was off on vacation in a very different state of mind. Our mental health is not something that you can kind of check in on periodically. It's as important to maintain as your physical health. And as soon as I realized that, I thought any attitude other than that is from another era.
Through the pandemic, many people experienced mental health challenges when they're by themselves. How do you and how have you coped?
For me, pandemic was really intense. I had ended a long marriage to a wonderful person because both of our journeys, it was time to change that. And so I was going through that process alone, felt like an echo chamber of feelings and thoughts and grieving. And then about, I would say 3 or 4 months into it, I lost a sibling, my beloved little brother. And the grief, it felt unmanageable to me, you know. I didn't know how I could cope with those feelings. It felt like a big, giant tackle on somebody who was already standing on marbles.
During that time, you talked about being physically active. Is that part of your wellness routine?
Yeah, it's the number one part of my wellness routine. That exertion puts me in my body, gives me a serenity that is just unmatched, that just works for me. Other people have different things. I know I meditate. I try to meditate every day, not for a long time. You know, after 20 years living in LA, I finally decided to try surfing. And I was lucky because the other stuff I do was very shut down for a bit. But I could take a big surfboard and put it in my car and go be the worst surfer on the wave. But I could do it almost every day. And just being in the ocean and paddling hard. I didn't care if, someone else beat me to the wave. At least I was getting some exercise. I was meditating. I was, speaking to a therapist and trying to work through it.
Why is it important for you to share your story and your mental health journey?
Because there's so much silence around anxiety, specifically in kind of amongst the men that I know. It became important to me to try to support any group like yours that is trying to make treatment available in a private, affordable way for people.
You spoke about initially feeling embarrassed. Can you explain why you felt embarrassed to get help?
I felt, and I still feel funny talking about it because in many ways I'm very private. But I also felt like there's a saying in recovery, you're only as sick as your secrets. And I think there's something to do with, because there's so much shame around it, I felt like if I could be of service to somebody else about it, one person, that would help my recovery, that would help me, be more comfortable with it, get rid of some of my own shame.
I feel like we're in a very different place because of people like you sharing their story.
I think we're in a very different place. I appreciate that. I think there's a lot of people, there's a lot of professional athletes who are just said, You need to judge me, but this is what's happening for me. I didn't choose it. You know, we're responsible for our choices, I think, and this is not a choice.
So what advice do you have for people who are facing either anxiety or a mental health challenge?
I think the number one piece of advice I'd have is, you're not alone. You're not alone. And the other thing is, nothing's wrong with you. The people I know who have some form of anxiety, any kind of mental health condition, a lot of times those are the most interesting, sensitive people in my life.